Hello, everybody. My name is Len Bear. This is another installment of Conversations with Experts. Today is an audio version of it, and we have a special guest joining me for a conversation. Inventor David Ruble. David, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks, Len. Great to be here this morning.
Excellent. So, David, tell me about your expertise, please.
So really, a lot of it, I guess, if you want to really go back, it all starts, from when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I always loved computers. I always loved technology. I guess engineering as well, science. Loved to take things apart, tinker. I loved electronics. Loved computers. So by the time I was 8 years old, I decided I wanted to learn computers at a technical level. So I, started learning all the nice power user admin type stuff on computers and really advanced my knowledge at a pretty young age. By the time I was 11, I had decided I wanted to start learning computer programming. So I started learning computer programming. I also started studying electronics at that point and started building different electronics at 11 years old. At first, it's kind of funny. At first, I did it because I wanted to build a link cable to be able to connect a calculator that I had to the computer to load games on it. So, kind of funny reason for an 11-year-old kid to want to learn electronics. But anyway, this stuff just kind of progressed. I would, I was the kind of kid that would find myself. I would be up at 2 o'clock in the morning watching college telecourses on public television, and the different sciences and history and everything else. Before I was even 10 years old. So that's the type of person and learner I've been. So I did end up going to college for 4 years. When I was I'll start off my IT career and college on the same exact day. So that was kind of funny how that worked out. But my degree is in information technology, information security, and I also while there did some classes on psychology, some other fun stuff. I've been studying and learning the different sciences pretty much throughout my life. Always been interested heavily in psychology, and then heavily in physics and science as well. So, due to just hobbies and I've done so much in my life. I've learned so many things, picked up so many different things along the years. My drone hobby I used to have really got me into some advanced electronics as far as radio equipment going and other things, but really that's been my entire life, is just a quest of learning. So when I started development in this stuff, I was pretty far along in, my knowledge, expertise, and experience in a lot of different areas with computers and technology. So I was pretty well suited, I guess, to start development on the Cyber Shield, which is obviously, one of the big reasons we're on the phone call today.
That's correct. So the name Cyber Shield, I have a question about this name. Have you done a trademark search for this name? Because there's a lot of Cyber Shields out there.
Yeah, it's it's kind of the day and age we live in. Unfortunately, there's so many there's so many companies operating with names for companies, names for products, and just all sorts of things, trademarks, slogans, and it's to the point where it's almost impossible these days to kind of butt heads with someone else or something else. So it's kind of a weird gray area I think we're in right now. For example, the last company that I worked for, they're called Above and Beyond. They operate, or the official name is Above and Beyond, and there's actually more to the name than that, but they operate under the name Beyond. And several other companies obviously operate under that name. So they're legally registered as one name, but operating under another, different things like that. So it's kind of interesting how all that works out. So even if you do trademark something like that, it's not a guarantee that somebody else isn't necessarily already using it or that somebody else won't use it. And it's just become so prevalent these days. It's impressive.
Well, that is true if you're trying to have a descriptive name. Everything is pretty much taken, but you can do pharmaceuticals what pharmaceutical companies do. They invent names that have never existed, and that gives it a distinct, unique name that you can trademark
Right.
use.
Like in chemistry, everything, all the naming actually makes sense for what the elements are that are in it, and whether it's an ion or not, things like that. So I mean, and then that's kind of the exact opposite.
Correct. Yeah, it's a made up name that it might reminisce with something, but ultimately it's a unique name or unique spelling or something like that. It
Right.
just
And I have thought about changing the name too. So I mean, it's interesting that you've brought that up. I mean, so many people though so far I identify it with either being the cyber shield or being the shield. Um, so I mean, there's all I it's a possibility. I would maybe be open to suggestions from someone like you, Len.
okay. That sounds great. I'll give it some thought. So tell me how many you said. I think you're in the very beginning of this um, device um, life of this device life. I, how many people have tried Cyber Shield?
So I need to calculate it up to give you a fair estimate. Um,
Well,
but it would be somewhere in the ballpark of about 70 people right now.
and so 70
And
people.
this is across the country and starting to be across the world. So it's in 7 different countries right now,
Okay,
and it
that's
works the same everywhere it goes.
that's very impressive. So 70 people currently using the product that you're in touch with, I assume.
Not currently. So some people are, some people were test. It was different instances were testing. It's probably more than that when you count all the. It's more than that when you count all the testing. But some of the other people who have done different testing with it, I don't necessarily have all the results and information. But yeah.
So let's go to
Uh,
okay. Yeah, I understand.
go
70
ahead.
is a fair estimate. So let's talk about what it is. I found the description on the website, but I would rather hear it from you, David. What is Cyber Shield?
Okay, so do you want the technical explanation?
I want an
That's
explanation
that's
that.
that's 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 the fun one.
Uh-huh. Okay, let's start with
So
technical.
the the technical explanation, it is a device built with an array of hardware designed to be able to create what is called a heterodyne effect in a wireless manner, and that effect is used in turn to create hertz and kilohertz frequencies. The heterodyne effect and how it works, I won't get too uh, in detail or technical on how this stuff works, but this is common RF engineering knowledge. It's kind of impressive. People didn't really think about this kind of stuff before, but basically, where taking advantage of being able to create those frequencies through the heterodyne effect with this array of hardware, which allows us to bypass the normal types of physical limitations and requirements that you would have to create those kind of frequencies and be able to apply them in some kind of manner. So this does it much more cheaply, smaller, more efficient. And the end result of that is that the equipment then is able to create this effect essentially right on the battlefront of where this different Havana syndrome technology, as some are calling it, is designed to operate. And it can operate at the same level in the same similar manners to how their equipment can, and it is actually applying in different neuroscience research. So what's went into this has been adapted from a few different research projects where they've essentially done the same thing. They've created a heterodyne effect in the laboratory, and they've used it to apply hertz and kilohertz frequencies to the brain to do different studies, testing things like neural suppression, neural activation, recording states. There's a lot of timing that goes into this. Power levels are important. And it can also, with the kilohertz research, there's even some, there's some different nerve functions in there where the certain frequencies with the right timings and power levels can even work to suppress or activate the nervous system itself. So what you're looking at essentially is anybody who's been affected by these things like Havana syndrome are going to know, what some of that kind of means about the fact that somebody can operate, on the brain. They can have actions on the neurons or the nervous system itself. There's, quite a bit of effects and functions that you could generate on somebody with the ability to do that to somebody. That's probably kind of without getting too technical, that's essentially what the hardware is. So then it's been designed around being able to apply protection by essentially creating a white noise across these ranges that are important to them to be able to block out their activities or try to suppress the activities of that kind of equipment. So it's been about a good 3 years in development to get to the point where it's at right now.
It's very impressive. I have a question to kind of clarify what this device actually does. To my knowledge, Havana syndrome and various remote neuromonitoring activities, they have heterodyning as a part of their control, of their entrainment. So you also provide
Yes.
provide heterodyning effect with this hardware. So would you say it competes? I understand you don't call it a jammer. It doesn't block anything.
No, the intent is not to go after radio signals. The intent is to go after frequencies in a much, much lower area of the spectrum. So we're talking ELF, VLF, but not anything long range. So it would be short range and kind of contained within the bubble of the radiation field of the equipment.
So would you say?
It's unfocused where theirs would be focused. So, there would be similarities in the equipment. There definitely is similarities in equipment they would use and how the effects would be created. In a system like Havana syndrome, normally what we would expect is if you needed a targeted action that was highly accurate, then you'd use very focused beams of RF, but you would use several of them so that you could overlay several on top of each other, and only when all of them mix together at the correct point, then the merging effect would be able to take place, and they would have a localized effect in that area where the beams converge.
Okay. So would
And
you
so just to explain as far as that goes, what I mean by beams is radio is just like sound or light. There's ways that you can focus it, so you can basically narrow it down and focus it so that you can concentrate the power of it and send it over further distances.
okay. So would you say that your device competes with that activity?
Well, in ways it's operating on what I guess you would call the same battlefront.
Okay.
So it
Oh,
is trying to operate at directly at their level. Where
okay.
so trying to block it from getting there in the first place would be an immensely difficult action. However, if you don't have to deal with the full power of everything, and you don't have to worry about basically, what could be nearly unlimited frequency within a certain extent to have to mitigate. Instead, if you choose to operate at the battlefield, you don't have to necessarily go, have direct counters against something. You can just kind of fight the war there. That's one way to look at it, I guess. So we're taking it directly to where they're having action, and we're performing action there to try to be able to provide suppression and disruption and allow the brain to do something that it likes to do, which is listen to things like different types of noise, but filter it out at the same time.
Okay.
So we
That's
just try to create a mess out of what they're doing, so that we start to make their activities into noise basically, and they're no longer having an effect.
that sounds like a novel type of device. Um, um, uh, what would be the category? You describe it as a hardware that does this protection, disruption through heterodyning effect. Do, do you think it's a new category of devices?
It's a new form of devices they already have, in sort of. So you have equipment. So you have other equipment that can apply hertz and kilohertz frequencies to the brain for different effects. One of them is the transcranial magnetic stimulation, for example. However, those type of technologies generally require placing something on the person who it's being applied to. So it requires, personal hardware versus this kind of crosses a threshold from equipment like that in the fact that it actually can operate at a range. So you don't have to have any equipment on you personally. You don't have to be wearing nothing, no electrodes. You don't have to have a wand with coils in it, or anything like that. So in ways, it's similar to some things that already exist. However, it is kind of a different classification. So it is wireless and it has a larger effect.
I understand. And then those wands or those devices that you describe and that used for therapeutic purposes, they usually just shoot one frequency.
Right. They're going to be very limited.
Correct. I understand that Cyber Shield is almost impossible to predict what kind of frequency and pulse rate it will generate. Um, Tell us about
Right.
that.
So it is a modular array of hardware. We have 9 different modules total in it. they can all operate independently of each other, and they also synchronize with each other. That's important for the heterodyne effect, is that we have to have this hardware in sync with each other at all times. Um, so that's one of the things to consider, is that with nine modules, yes, we can do far more than one at any given time. We can also do it really fast. So when we're making changes on this hardware, we're doing it at the microsecond level. There's a million microseconds in 1 second. Some of these operations are taking place in 50 microseconds or less on this device. So they are happening extremely fast. We avoid any kind of bottlenecks in the hardware by directly interfacing with the hardware in the different modules we use, and we just directly transfer bits to them to operate all this hardware in parallel. The software has been designed to operate it in this manner in as random of a way as possible. So one thing that a lot of people have observed when studying this stuff is, anytime you find something that seems to have any kind of effect at all, even if it's just a little, if it presents a pattern, so anything repetitious, which means you can predict what happens next, it seems to get broke down, calibrated against, and won't function anymore. So something might initially work, and then after maybe a few days, it just completely doesn't function anymore, because they can completely predict the hardware. So that was important principle that I understood in the early development of it, was that I had already studied and did tests and realized that, they will react to anything you do, and they will counter any pattern you present. So every level of operation has to be randomized. The hardware has to work together in a very coordinated, controlled manner. It has to apply functions in a very precise manner. However, it needs to do all these specific and precise actions as randomly as possible. So every level of its operation is as random as we can make it. So there is no way to know what any specific piece of equipment in this is going to do next. This is essentially what you were getting at. So that's been built through layers upon layers of random operation. However, it just again, to point out, what we are randomizing, though, is something, it's very controlled what we're randomizing, but it's a lot of different timing variations, what frequencies it uses next, things like that. So it's very unpredictable for them, and I think that's part of what helps it be more successful.
Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with the sort of speed thought studies? I remember reading that there's about 200 millisecond delay between the thought occurring and the person realizing that he has that thought.
Reaction times.
Yeah, reaction time. Okay, and I from correct me if I'm wrong. It was it's about 200 milliseconds. So we're talking about.
I think you're somewhere around in the area for what you would call the average human's reaction time.
Right. So your device operates and changes modes in the microseconds, which is a millionth of a second instead of a milli, which is a thousand of a second.
Right.
So your device operates faster than a speed of thought. Would that be a reasonable explanation?
That would 100% be, and that's probably a good way to look at it, which is why some of that timing is obviously going to be very important, because some of the signals have a suppressive effect. So it matters if that can kind of catch some of that thought before it really gets a chance to branch out too far or reach any kind of fruition when it's an area that's being affected by them.
Correct. Because as far as I know, this remote neural monitoring, because it's just energy flowing back and forth, it operates at the speed of light. So it is important. The timing is really important. And so
Right.
with the micro. Uh,
Well, so not only that, but so the timing, the power level is important as well for the neurons themselves. So the power level the power level or the amount of energy that they receive is going to determine what state that neuron is going to be in. So, a short, lower power, you could be talking about suppression or non-activation. You can have you can have a neutral state, you can have an activation or like a reporting state. So timing's important because the energy level will set that, but also how long it's potentially trying to be held open. So when a channel opens, how long it's going to stay open for can be affected by energy level, but the state is affected by energy level as well. So part of the way you control that energy level is through the power level itself, but also through timing. So when you limit the exposure, you can limit the amount of energy that would potentially be received or absorbed in any given time. So we're looking more at trying to hold a suppressive state mostly against what they're doing. So this would be something that needs to run really fast. We're not trying to apply a lot of power for very long. We're trying to basically halt anything that would be getting triggered by what's being done and to try to cut it off, which obviously for the people who need that, it can provide a lot of relief to them to not have everything kind of going haywire anymore.
I understand. Do you think it's a patentable technology?
I'm sure it possibly could be in that construct. I think probably the copyright on it is more important with the software. The hardware can do a lot of stuff. It's actually an interesting hardware platform that a lot of people would find very interesting. Experiment for a lot of other things with it. It really has a lot of potential to it. What makes it special, though, is, we did need this configuration that didn't exist anywhere else. So this had to be made because we couldn't get off the shelf, equipment to work at the levels we needed. But it's the software really is the heart of it. That's what makes it important. It's what the software does. It's the research that went into the development of that software, into the actions that it performs. That really is what I see as the most important part.
Right. And full disclosure, I am one of the owners of Cyber Shield, and but I am not ready to summarize my experience. I've only been using it for a few days, and it's just too early to talk about a prolonged effect. I would like to test it for at least a month. And the hardest part of it, of course, David, is that how do you run a controlled experiment with this hardware? Do you have?
So, Dr. Duncan right now is attempting to do some stuff with that to really, try to, if he's looking for some different candidates that he'd want to try it with, to do a really controlled approach to do, some different studies, like I believe even blind as well, to generate some good scientific reports at that point. So, we've worked with a lot of people along the way in this, had a lot of good results. We've had a few hiccups along the way. There's been a couple people it didn't really work for whatever reason. For most people, this works for. Have an extremely low return rate on these. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there
Yeah.
for a moment. My son was trying to get my attention. He's distracting me. Sorry about that. So wait, hold on. What was the question again?
About the running a controlled experiment.
Yeah.
Problems associated with it.
Right. Yeah. Total brain fart. Yeah. So the very controlled one, I guess, should be in progress right now or soon. And then that's being handled by Dr. Robert Duncan, who most people, a lot of people, I think, who we are acquainted with are familiar with.
Of course, I know personally Dr. Duncan, and appeared with him on Concrete Podcast that now has over 180,000 views or something like that. So we made some.
Oh wow! Congratulations.
We made yes. Tell me about
that's an impact. That's great.
That is an impact. Yeah. And yesterday there was a conference that should be circulating on Facebook, a total information control conference that I was a part of. And I spoke about Havana syndrome and my personal journey and the information and sort of the evolution of information surrounding it. So
right. And then it's those are interesting stories when you make it to the levels that some of us have in the fight against it all.
Yeah, awareness is everything. So, but today we bring awareness about this cyber shield hardware software combination. And tell me, what kind of feedback you get? Like, give me the most interesting, peculiar example of the feedback that you received from the actual users.
Well, so I mean, on that note, I have to be cautious because I am limited in what I can, tell you about other people's personal experience. I think most, for the most part, though, to try to summarize feedback is, generally we see a lot of positive results from people. So that's a lot of the feedback that I'll get is how much it's been helping them with a lot of different things. And then on the flip side of it, I guess the other feedback, and that's why I don't want to get into it too specific, is just some of the personal things that the people are still dealing with. So once the equipment's doing its work and they still maybe have a couple different symptoms that are still feeling kind of strong for them, that would be a lot of the conversation then, and then trying to work with them to try to adjust their equipment and see if we can dial it in better for them to get them, additional coverage for those kind of areas. So, I mean, really a lot of it pertains to that. As far as people's testimonies and stuff, I mean, people go out and do that online, and I get to see them at times. I mean, some of them are available like on the PACT's website where it's listed. We could get into that here in a moment. But really, that's what a lot of my interaction with the people pertains around is just that it's helped them a lot with a lot of things. But then again, I don't want to get into the private details of the specifics of working out trying to make the equipment better for them and getting it dialed in for them.
Well, I'll tell you, David, what I will do after a month of using it, because I made my case very public. I'm very open about what's happening to me, because it's so important. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than all of us. We're talking about future of humanity, of future of human species, our independence, having our sense of agency and etc. untouched.
Right, bearing in mind that the militaries of the world tell us that this technology is not going away. This is the future.
Correct. And so we have to negotiate our rights around this. Something that is now been called neural rights. One of I think the only country that enshrined it into the law is Chile, to my knowledge. And this is something that we will have to have public conversation and negotiate the new rights around
right,
it.
especially also the other area to consider as well. This is important and something I like to express to people, because it's an area that kind of gets overlooked at where we actually are in the state of the art of consumer technology. And what I mean by consumer technology is this is technology that you buy off the shelf. This is stuff that you could walk into your local electronics superstore and purchase, or hop on a public website and buy the equipment. So there are technologies on the market right now that are, the types of technology that's used in this stuff. This is equipment that could even be modified, but we're not going to worry so much about that part at the moment. What is worrisome is there's consumer technology on the market now. There's a lot more emerging. These are going to be mind control type products. These are going to be products designed around monitoring or even stimulating different neural and nervous system activity. One of the products, for example, that you can go and purchase this right now if you want it and try it out, if you want to actually see some of this tech up close and personal. It's this device. It's called NextMind, NEXTMIND. It is a device that goes on the back of your head. It reads the occipital lobe of the brain, and where some of your visual data is processed, and this device is actually able to tell, what the different things that you're looking at, and it's able to translate some of that activity into actual action in a computer game or software or on the TV. So this thing lets you play video games with your mind. You don't have to move a muscle. Basically, you're able to play video games with thought alone. You're able to change the channels on your TV or turn the volume up or down. Mercedes-Benz just released a prototype car that they were showing off that has this same technology in it. Everything, they're touting it as a mind-controlled car. I'm assuming, all the entertainment and climate functions and things like that are probably, set up through this interface to where you can control it all with your mind and not have to actually push a button or flip a switch. There's a lot more stuff being worked on. We have the Open BCI Institute. This is a public collaboration of just regular people who are working on AI technology as well as the hardware to do the different BCI monitoring of nervous system data and they're trying to train the software right now to literally convert your thoughts into text on a computer screen. Now, mind you, this isn't a government entity. This isn't a business. This is just people. So at the public level, we're developing this kind of tech. There's stuff you can already buy on the market. There's more advanced stuff in the pipelines. So when we talk about protecting our neural data, I mean, our government's already dropped the ball on it. We are already missing protections we need now because products already on the market that are already obtaining neural data that are, is pumped into AI systems in the cloud, online. It could be stolen. So, we're already at the point of needing at least a foundation of these protections, and we don't have it yet. So, it's going to be a really big thing, I think, that the government really needs to focus on, especially in the next coming years, because we're going to see a lot more of this stuff. It's going to get a lot more advanced. It's going to be a little bit impressive, but it's going to be a little bit scary. People will have a penchant for hacking things. Imagine when half the products you might buy could have technology like that in it, and people start hacking it, and we don't have protections. What then? Then it gets a lot worse.
I agree. And what you described is pretty much just one side of the technology. It's the sensing technology, it's the mind reading, it's neural decoding technology. What about
Yep.
the other side, the intervention side? Is there anything besides those?
So I mean,
Yeah.
we kind of see that already in some products now. Not in any. We don't see anything, necessarily aggressive, but different therapeutic and devices out there already, like the TMS devices, for example, and the other different stimulating devices that they have has an input effect. Now, mind you, this isn't a very focused, very targeted effect that has very specific, detailed operations. It is an overall larger effect. However, that is the precursor of the inputs. What happens is these kind of technologies, if popular enough, get developed further and further out, that I know some of them already do start to aim the magnets. So I don't want to completely say they're not focused yet. Some of them do actually focus a little, but not the precision that you and I would be thinking about in our minds right now yet. But they will get there. But the inputs are already there. When they get very high caliber, very specific, very precise, because right now the ones with the adjustable stuff you have to run in conjunction with an MRI. I should make note of that for people. But it's coming. So some of the equipment is already here on the input side. I don't know how practical it would be for anybody to weaponize something like that or use it at a distance. But these are the kind of things that eventually, happen when people have technologies that could perform different actions that they might be able to use and exploit for their personal gain. People will do it. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. And so they are there. I would expect them to get much better in the future and to be exploited at some point along the line.
I agree. Technology gets democratized, more accessible. But in my mind, Havana syndrome is a perfect example when both the input and the output are connected, because it's a targeted act. So you have to have
because you have a developed system.
Yeah.
You actually have what we call an IT system at that point.
Correct.
It's a complete technology package. It's been fleshed out with all the different sensors, with its outputs. It's been integrated with other systems for situational awareness. It's an advanced system, and it is what you would call militarized in its capability, as well as its coverage where it's been deployed. Pretty much everywhere. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of time to deploy this stuff.
Well, I think I told you before, David, that my case was forwarded to a neuroweapon expert at Georgetown University in DC, Dr. James Giordano. He validated it. He forwarded it. He forwarded my case to the Department of Defense, because it's a matter of defense to the civilians like myself have to be protected. These cases have to be investigated. But then, but there's no therapeutic path for somebody to be helped for as long as these attacks and this bidirectional remote neural monitoring is continuing. So now that I'm testing CyberShield, after a month of use, I will be reporting it to Dr. Giordano, with whom
Great, and I'm waiting for that, because he'll probably reach out to me afterwards. I'm thinking. So we're definitely hoping for the best for it. I mean, as you know, I know Dr. Giordano as well. I had several conversations with him. He's actually signed legal paperwork with me and agreed to work for me. So at some point when I am ready and I have the funding to pay his fees, he's agreed to allow me to hire him as a subject matter expert to be a liaison, to be a consultant to me, but also to be a liaison to DARPA and the Department of Defense, to be able to do contract bidding proposals, stuff like that. So still trying to get everything to the point where I can successfully do that part. So it's going to get interesting.
I think it has a huge future. Just look at the number of targeted individuals in this country and all over the world. I mean, we don't have exact numbers, and there are very few people diagnosed. I'm waiting for the time when the diplomats start reaching out to you, because I have a hunch that their targeting, their attacks continued on the U.S. soil.
Yes.
They are not allowed to talk about it. That is my
yes. I agree. I agree 100%, Len. I've actually said the same thing to Dr. Giordano in a phone conversation. I told him the same thing flat out. I said, I do not believe that the attacks have stopped on these diplomats, and I can prove it, that the attacks are ongoing. And what they are claiming are the results of brain damage from the injuries that they believe occurred by these attacks are actually what, the program that our military would, here in the U.S. would be familiar with, is that's what you call textbook neuro S&T. That's a program they have for this type of technology, and that is textbook in operations. However, that's textbook in operations against an enemy who you need to essentially disqualify. So they've basically created a situation where the medical records and what's going on and what's believed isn't accurate. So people are not able to get the treatment that they need, and allow a problem to be ongoing and persist and progress. But I've explained the same thing to him, that I believe that these so-called symptoms of the after effects, the damage that occurred because of what happened, are not that. They are symptoms of ongoing attacks. And if these people were able to get protection from that, you would see these symptoms go away.
I spoke to several neurologists, including the ones who diagnosed me and agreed with Dr. Hoffer's diagnosis. They are not interested in detection methods for these attacks. And
no, and there's probably good reason.
Right. And the government has
we're not at a point, I think, where the government has fleshed everything out about how they're going to handle what is going to be disclosed, when something is disclosed, for whatever they finally determine the next step and the next level of where they have to take everything that's happened when they reach that. I think there's a lot of stalling for time right now.
I would agree with that.
Essentially, I just think it really comes down to, you are seeing, it's not even a smoke screen. They are just stalling. They aren't even, they aren't even really giving any information out. There's no flow of, assaulted information. There's no smoke coming out right now. There's nothing. There isn't even a fire burn, and they're just sitting there trying to have as much time as they can to kind of get it figured out. So I mean, I get it. It's a big problem. But it's going to have to be worked out. at some point.
And it's pretty much an open secret. We understand there Mark Zaid, attorney at in DC, who represents federal employees, openly calls it government cover-up. That the government knows what it is. The government would not acknowledge any domestic attacks, and yet they're happening. Experts know
Right,
how to diagnose. You have a device that helps with active attacks. Why would this device help anybody who is not having active attacks? I mean, is it a placebo effect?
right,
I don't think so. People are very much in tune with their conditions. It is truly, to explain to somebody what it is almost impossible, because it is
right.
such a distinct subjective feeling, sensation, experience, that you can just you can't it's nothing, it's like nothing else. There's no other comparative experience.
No, I would agree. That's the problem I run into is to try to describe what it's like. I can't. You can't. There's nothing to relate it to.
I heard.
It's new. It's learning. It's a learning experience.
Right. uh, but uh, an interesting thing that I noticed when you were setting up my hardware, you said um, um, you distinguish between neural and physical attacks. Can you tell me a little bit how you distinguish those?
So we would be talking about attacks that are specialized, what you would call a function that is designed to have a very specific effect neurologically would be a neural effect. Uh, a physical effect would be something more attuned to having stimulation against the nervous system. So physical attacks are going to be things that can cause discomfort, muscle cramping, pain, burning, jolts, muscle spasms. A lot of pain involved in that. So we're talking about, yeah, something attacking nerves versus neurons. So one area is more specific to the head, and I think in sometimes we've seen instances where they're attacking the gut as well. Um, one of the things science has learned here and talks about more openly lately is your gut has a lot of neurons in it, and essentially is its own brain and can operate itself, independently of our brain and our functions. It can kind of do its own thing, and there is communication back and forth between these neurons that are in your gut and your brain, and we've seen even that getting attacked both as a neurological and as a physical attack at the same time. So that would be exploiting the fact that there's neurons in there they can have an effect against, which can be really disruptive to your bowels. You can imagine, if somebody could make your bowels just as confused as they could make your brain, we don't have to get into much discussion about all the complications there.
So, okay, now I understand what you mean by neural versus physical. To me, it sounds like you
Yeah.
make the distinction between the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Would
Yes.
that
So
make
so when we talk about the nervous system itself, all the nerves you have running through your body, those can be attacked actually in a different manner. So where you'd be looking for a heterodyne effect, uh, with neural effects, with physical effects, they can be obtained a lot easier because you can focus a lot of energy. There's a lot of different methods that you can use for aiming and steering, RF or microwave energy, EM, whatever you want to call it. It's all essentially the same thing, different names for different reasons. But when you send a high enough level of that in a focused enough manner, that it can be absorbed by something, it's going to have an effect. So with nerves, interestingly enough, you have all these nerves in your body, they're different lengths. When we talk about RF technology communications, frequencies also have a length. They have a physical size to them. So when we talk antennas, you would have specific lengths of antenna to transmit and receive, to tune your signal optimally to have the best reception based on what frequencies you were broadcasting and transmitting. So the nervous system can be exploited like that as well, that you could actually probe the body out with different frequencies and find activation points or reception points in the nervous system of somebody at different frequencies where nobody else has that precise one in that person's immediate area. And you could literally, focus and broadcast and hit that specific nerve just by tuning your output to the frequency of the physical length of that nerve.
I understand.
So it's just as an idea of how some of that can work. So that's how some of that pain can kind of be targeted into specific things where they might hit you and, you could get a burning sensation, or you could get a shocking sensation or an itching sensation, different effects based on the nerves, how you're stimulating them.
Okay, I understand. So before we end this conversation, I would like to share something with our listeners. You did some very impactful coaching with me, and I thought I mastered my condition the best I could, and yet you gave me a very valuable advice. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I gave a little bit. There's several different things that I like to tell people as both as things that are helpful and important for them to help them move forward, but also just to help to start improving their general state, which cause complications. But anyway, which one specifically are you referring to?
A very specific advice you told me when you next time they bother you with V2K, smile. That was a very simple, impactful.
Oh, I'm glad you said that because I keep hearing this from people. I do suggest that to everybody. When somebody, it's interesting. The Asian culture has this down pat, and it probably helps them a lot, I guess. But essentially, if somebody's yelling at you, being angry, being mean, trying to insult you or degrade you, they smile. And why? Because, I mean, for them, it's part of their culture, but psychologically, it's a lot deeper than that. That smile is attached to every memory in your head where you were happy in your life. So when you start smiling, it draws on that stuff, and it's hard to try to wear a smile on your face and not start to feel genuinely happy at some point. There's just so much connection to that action. But not only that, when we talk about the fact that when we get more in depth about what's going on, there's a psychological program being run. That program relies on your response. It creates inputs through various manners designed to try to get specific results from you, specific outputs. A lot of that revolves around emotion. A lot of it revolves around negative emotion. We won't get in depth. There's a lot of reasons why, a lot of psychological reasons why negative emotions are important when we want to talk about power and control, trying to control somebody. So a simple smile that will draw on more positive emotions is a very disruptive effect when someone's attempting to do something to you to try to create a negative emotional state. That smile, just like in person, it's very disruptive. It's not what people expect, and a lot of a psychological program and process is about expectations. It's about trying to push things towards a tailored result, towards, you know, a known result, a specific result. And that smile, how often do you find yourself smiling because what's happening to you? Like never.
Never.
And so it's important, you know. They don't want that smile. They don't want you happy. They want anything but that. So, you know, it can be a big help, really. I mean, just even in life in general, if you're having, you know, a bad day, you're having a hard time, you're not in the greatest mood, whatever's going on, that smile is a powerful weapon in life. Whenever anything's going badly in your life, throw that smile on, especially when you have to deal with things that are much worse than just, you know, the normal problems of life. But that, you know, when an action's performed against you, it is designed to get a negative emotional response. So give them the opposite. Give them something else. Give them what they don't expect, and you'll start to find out that you actually have a lot more power and control than you realize in the process of that. Part of what's happened was to make you forget that you're not in control. You don't have any power anymore. You know what? Your decisions don't matter. Somebody else is trying to make them for you and choose everything for you, and you kind of get conditioned into that, you know, process, into that loop, into that cycle. And ultimately, you know, so we just have to realize we can actually take that back. We can actually take control of it. Nobody at the end of the day is responsible for how you emotionally feel except for yourself when the ability is yours to choose. So I present that to people that, you know, even if it's difficult to choose that state, or especially if you've been given the opportunity to freely choose that state, wear that smile, be happy, you know, fight, you use that as a weapon against them. Always give them something that they don't expect. All right, I've got my son hollering at me in the background for cereal.
We will wrap it up, but there you go, ladies and gentlemen. David Ruble, a person who weaponized smile and has hardware. So
hardware to help it.
Thank you very much for this conversation. Would you like to give your coordinates if you want people to contact you?
So if somebody would like to reach out to me, they can do so at my email address is D as in David, R as in Robert, U as in United, B as in Barry, L as in Larry, E as in Edward, the number's 81@gmail.com. And if anybody's interested in the Cyber Shield that we talked about and just wanted to see some more information on that, it's easier for me to just tell you how to get to it. Go to Google and type World Tech, EEK, shielding, and you'll find the PAX World Tech Shielding Solutions website, and you'll find a link to the Cyber Shield on there. Would be the easiest way to get more information on that.
Okay. David, please text me that link. I will post it in the description.
Sure thing.
And thank you for listening. This has been a terrific conversation. David, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you too. And I'll look forward to being back on another time. We can do something in video.
That would be great. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Take care, Len. Thanks for having me on. Bye.